We all have our favorite anime, whether it be a battle shonen, a slice of life, or an action adventure. But my goal is to present 10 anime today that you may not have heard of before. 10 anime that are unique, philosophical, avant-garde, and different. Something to challenge you, something you may have never seen before, and something to broaden your perspective so that you may explore a new world of anime that you may have never explored before. To be clear, these are not my 10 favorite anime, however, they are among my favorites, and some that I've watched countless times. Each one of the anime that I have selected for today brings something unique to the table, and I want to explore these with you in just one brief moment. But before we do, a quick word from our sponsor. If there's anything you want, anything at all, come to me. I'll be your guardian angel. Deep underground, as if existing in the pits of hell, exists the crumbling city of Lux and its populace of despondent citizenry. Texhnolyze is not so much about people, but rather what constitutes human truth. Throughout history, philosophers, scientists, theologians, and powerful rulers have defined the fundamental nature of being in an attempt to justify their existence. The pursuit of science through artificial, technologized limbs offers humans greater possibilities. Physical limitations are removed to realize a higher state of being, but such a state of being removes the essence of humanity, the animal that lies dormant, if you will. It is a cold, loveless existence that offers nothing more than a sense of longing for what was lost. The main religious organization in the series, the Union, rejects the technologization of humans, relying on a collectivist mindset over the individual. They speak as one, dress as one, and think as one. They are of one heart and one flesh. For the Union, any modification through technologization erodes the soul. Their truth is rooted in belief, a belief that negates emotions, negates individuality, and negates life. In a sense, it negates life just like the proponents of technologization, but for the opposite reasons. Technologization, in an attempt to transcend humanity, disregards the chaotic elements that define the human species, while the Union suppresses these elements in the abyss of their souls, never to see the light of day. True freedom cannot lean on anything. It is transient, lonely, and arduous. The ever-enigmatic Kazuho Yoshi is the agent provocateur of the series. He comes from a world where emotion is imprisoned in one's psyche, the unknowing end goal of the proponents of technologization and those of the Union. Yet, suppressing one's emotions are a self-imposed restriction to maintain a peaceful living death. Surely, the people from the surface aren't literally dead, but they're not exactly alive either. Yoshi henceforth descended into the bowels of hell to meet people who still possess some passions deep within their souls that he could bring to the surface in a deluge of chaotic glory. He recognized that most people are subservient to quote-unquote notions of truth, that they've completely abandoned thoughts of achieving individual greatness. Now, in my opening monologue, I described the city of Lux as somewhat of a hell. This can be viewed in two lenses. One, a hell from a psychological sense, is the flurry of emotions that we often see as undesirable, but ultimately necessary in achieving our optimal potential. In contrast, one can view the surface as the completely rational, left-brained individual whom has created a proverbial heaven, whereas Lux is the chaotic right brain that gives into the passion, the violence, and the lust. Together, heaven and hell creates a balance, but separated, as it is in Texhnolyze, creates disorder and an unstable environment. Now, the second reason that Lux is hell is the obvious allusions to Dante Alighieri's The Divine Inferno. Now, there's much to say about this symbolism that I would like to expand upon in a future video, but that will come at a later time. As a warning, prior to watching Texhnolyze, understand that the pacing and the minimalistic dialogue is a bit jarring, so don't get too discouraged if it feels a bit sluggish at times. The payoff is worth it, and the methodical nature is important in teasing out core tendencies in humankind, and how the lack of stimulation is poison to the soul. As everything in this world is but a sham, death is the only sincerity. Shigurui is based on a manga that was written and illustrated by Takayuki Yamaguchi. In 2007, Madhouse adapted the manga into a 12-episode anime that is gorgeously brutal and immerses the viewer into the inhumane world of the samurai. The story begins with two arch-enemies, a one-armed samurai and a blind samurai, who are brought together for one last bloodbath. As soon as the battle begins, we are transported back in time to unravel how these two men arrived at this point in history. While I won't spoil any important details for you, the common theme throughout the series is that of hopelessness and contempt, and, well, a lot of bloodshed. Do not expect the protagonist to experience joy, relief, or satisfaction, and do not expect to like the protagonist whatsoever. All their efforts are in vain. Life is a miserable existence, with copious amounts of rape, killing, and disfigurement. Fighting against the current is often a fruitless endeavor, and usually only serves to hasten one's death. As you would expect, Shigurui has a depressive atmosphere that is only curbed by the elegant artwork and fluid animation. In one sense, you'll be in a double state of awe. One, from the savage nature of the character's actions, and the second, from the splendid display of visual entertainment. You're gonna want to divert your eyes away in a lot of moments, but at the same time, you won't be able to take your eyes off the screen. Shigurui doesn't pull any punches, and it's gonna be one of those series that is gonna change you, for the better or for the worse. It's also a series that you don't want to get attached to any one character at any given time, because you never know when they're gonna die. Life is definitely a transient experience, one that goes by way too fast, and Shigurui embraces this wholeheartedly. So if you're ready for bloodshed, if you're ready for pain, gut-wrenching moments, vomit-inducing moments, and a whole lot of action, this might be the anime for you. In this world, is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law? Is it like the hand of God hovering above? At least it is true that man has no control, even over his own will. Berserk, 1997, also known as Swordwind Chronicle Berserk, is an anime adaptation of the dark fantasy novel written and illustrated by Kentaro Miura. The story begins with the monstrous Baron of Koga Castle, a man who consumes human flesh on the regular. A wandering swordsman, Guts, strolls into the town, searching for answers. Yet, this is no ordinary swordsman. Not only does he wield a massive chunk of iron that he calls a sword, he also has a mechanical arm that can be used as a cannon or a repeating crossbow. Guts is certainly not your prototypical anti-hero, as he is seen brutalizing his enemy with a bunch of arrows in the face. And after the first episode, we enter a flashback to discover why he's the rage-fueled man whom takes pleasure in the pain of others. If you've been a fan of my channel for any length of time, you know my love for Berserk, so I'm intimately aware of the differences between the 1997 anime and the manga. Now, in most cases, these differences would be a detriment, but I'm here to boldly claim that the differences in the anime are in no way a diminishing aspect to the quality of the overall product. Now, one of the differences of note is that Puck is adapted out of the series and makes no cameo appearances. Because the 1997 series was primarily focused on the Golden Age arc, it made the wise decision of eliminating the magical / out-of-this-world events until the confrontation with Zod. Because of this, Guts' encounter with the Minotaur was truly an enigmatic moment for the viewers, making us wonder what was truly going on. Besides this, the realistic take on European warfare, without the addition of strange creatures, sort of lulled the audience into a false sense of security, making the events that transpired afterwards all the more shocking. In addition, the climactic moment of the series is left without a proper resolution, and I would argue that this is one of the most ambitious endings I've ever seen in fiction. And to be frankly honest, it's probably one of the most unhappy endings we've ever seen in the medium. Now, while the anime adapts from the original tale, it is by no means required to be 100% faithful, and beyond the pages of the manga, it is now its own separate entity, with a proverbial life of its own. And frankly, me, I like the idea that things could potentially end for Guts there and then, since for all intents and purposes, it did, with sorrow and heartbreak. I mean, let's be honest, you'll never see an ending quite like the one you saw for Berserk, and for my taste, I absolutely love that. I want to see something unique, original, something never done before. It was a huge risk, but I believe it paid off. In addition, the anime has an amazing soundtrack from Suzumu Hirasawa. Songs like Bailet, Gats, and Murder are permanently etched into my memory. It is even said that Miro was listening to these tracks while writing the manga itself, so he had this music in his mind and it was brought to life, which is a really cool concept. And for my taste, each track fits the mood of the series and heightens the intensity/importance of each scene. Le Portrait de Petite Cossette, also known as The Portrait of Cossette, is a 3-episode OVA series that ran in 2004. It features a gorgeous, blonde-haired girl whose spirit lingers in a Venetian glass. Turns out her spirit has been housed in said glass for over 200 years, waiting for someone to fall in love with her. Eri, a talented artist who works at his family's antique shop, stumbles upon the glass one day and is transported to a strange, dreamlike existence. Or, to be more precise, this is more of a nightmarish existence than a dream. Several bone-chilling events are witnessed, like a red cross exploding in blood, a doll of Cossette bleeding from the eye sockets, and many instances of Eri being tortured for his purported sins. The dramatic visuals evoke a mixture of feelings, none of which are pleasant. The atmosphere is a combination of somberness and consternation. The Portrait of Cossette is intended to affect your innermost feelings through a torrent of anxiety and sadness. This is not a tale that seeks to communicate an elaborate message through grand symbolism, although it should be noted that the symbolism is quite abstract and hard to follow at times. But if the viewer keeps in mind that this is a tale of unreciprocated love, then the series of events make a whole lot of sense. The story is predicated on tragedy and revenge. Akiyuki Shimbo, the director for Cossette, accentuates these ideas through his use of intense shadow play and intricate background settings. Though I'm not the biggest fan of CG animation, the filmmakers use this sparingly as not to tarnish the rest of the splendid artwork. In addition, the soundtrack complements the hauntingly beautiful tale. The screeching violins go hand in hand with the gothic aesthetic, creating a melancholic atmosphere to accentuate Eri's gruesome retribution. As an artistic piece that tells a story about the artistic process, there's a bit of pretentiousness involved with this. But this is in no way a detriment. In fact, it serves a useful purpose in highlighting the flaws with many artistic pursuits and how that can disassociate one from the matters of flesh and blood. Belladonna of Sadness is a 1973 film produced as a part of the Animorama trilogy conceived by Osamu Tezuka. It was inspired by the 1862 book La Sorcellerie, Satanism and Witchcraft, by French historian Jules Michelet. Belladonna features two newlyweds as they experience the zenith of bliss, until the local baron rapes the woman. From the outset, this has a similar vibe to Berserk, a detail that many others have noticed on Reddit and other social media platforms. The artwork in particular seems to have inspired Mira, and the ever-persistent, melancholic tone is a familiar theme in the Berserk canon. Now, the term Belladonna is apropos for the title of the series, since it has a dual meaning, the first one being a beautiful woman, and the second one being a deadly nightshade, reportedly used in witchcraft as a flying ointment. The duality of good and evil, beauty and dreadful, light and dark is the appropriate representation for Belladonna of Sadness. It contrasts the opposites in a beautiful display of artistic glory. The imaginative use of watercolors with nightmarish symbolism is beyond poignant. In fact, it's soul-altering. Among the wide array of erotic/grotesque imagery is the ever-present theme of female sexual repression. Jeanne, the protagonist of the story, is prized for her alluring beauty, but she's also feared for her power and her ability to rebel against the misogynistic practices of medieval times. Despite its use of static images, Belladonna's expressive artwork is a psychedelic explosion of visceral emotion. I will admit though, the chaotic vulgarity is a bit uncomfortable, but if Jeanne must suffer through psychological torment, then so must you to commiserate with her pain. Her world is turned upside down, hence the reason the artwork is disorienting, to induce confusion and mental turbulence. You share in her bewilderment, in her disarray, in her discovery, and in her torment. We all possess an innumerable amount of secrets that have yet to be discovered by our conscious selves. Yet to do so, we must venture off into the darkest, scariest places to unearth the beauty that lies underneath. Or as Nietzsche once said, I am a forest and a night of dark trees, but he who is not afraid of my darkness will find banks full of roses under my cypresses. As a preface, Belladonna of Sadness is an avant-garde film, so it's very experimental, new, and innovative. It expresses ideas in different ways, and it will make you a little bit uncomfortable. But any experience worth having in life requires a bit of challenge. So I challenge you to watch this film and learn a bit about yourself. My Neighbor Totoro is an animated film written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. The famed Miyazaki co-founded Studio Ghibli in 1985 with long-term friend Isao Takahata and Toshio Suzuki. The third film in the studio's history, My Neighbor Totoro, came out in 1988 and became such a hit that Totoro himself became the mascot for Studio Ghibli. Not only has the film generated $1.142 billion from licensed merchandise sales, Totoro was prominently featured in Pixar's Toy Story 3. He's seen in Bonnie Anderson's room several times. Woody even gives him a hug. But before his cameo in Toy Story 3, Totoro was seen in a magical forest where a small girl named Mai found him whilst following a smaller, magical creature. The interactions with Mai, her sister Satsuki, and Totoro are all intriguing, whimsical, and full of surprises. It captures the imaginative elements of childhood innocence and portrays it in a unique way. When you combine this with the stellar artwork and animation, this film is truly a work of art. But the true work of art comes from the story itself. A story that doesn't really feel like a story, but more like a capsule of real life. We've all heard of the term slice of life, and understand that it seeks to express a naturalistic experience over convoluted plot points. However, most anime whom fall under this category are slice of life in name only, and oftentimes rely on over-exaggerated situations to generate laughter, sadness, or empathy. Miyazaki's philosophy, on the other hand, is built upon simplicity. It thusly gives weight to hardships, buoyancy to jovial situations, and life to the characters themselves. For me, a sign of a worthwhile slice of life is one that makes you forget that you're actually watching a movie. One that makes you genuinely nervous for the character's well-being, and one that creates a legacy that is not soon forgotten. This next anime may surprise you, given the stigma surrounding the show. Without going into details, School Days has a score of 5.56 out of 10 on MAL, otherwise known as My Anime List. And for anyone who's familiar with the website, that is absolutely horrendous. But it doesn't seem like the criticism centers around the show itself, but more so around a single character. A character who, for all intents and purposes, is kind of an asshole and kind of repulsive as a human being. But is that any reason to hate him? Is that any reason to hate the show? Let's think about that. Now, the character I'm referring to is Makoto Ito. He's the main male protagonist, and he has a crush on a girl that he sees on a subway. Now, Makoto starts off as your average teenager with a crush on a girl. Now, to get the girl's attention, he invokes the help of his friend, Sakai, to give him advice on love and relationships. Now, the concept may seem relatively basic, and that's because it is. It's not really a convoluted or complex story. But the reason that it shines so brightly is because of its simplicity. Because it feels so down to earth and real. It feels like all the actions are something you could see in an everyday person, possibly even yourself. And that's kind of the idea. Firstly, School Days showcases how one can bungle a simple misunderstanding and create a mountain of problems out of molehills. Given the series of events that Makoto encountered, I can't really blame him for his actions. Young men are primarily driven by their sexual desires. So when an opportunity arises to act on them, it's hard to take a step back and think things through. The common idiom, thinking with your penis, comes to mind, and explains why men think of short-term rewards over long-term ramifications and how that may affect your friendships. Now, does this absolve Makoto from his quote-unquote despicable nature? It's hard to say. As an honest question, if you had the options available to be with multiple women, it would be very hard to say no to that. Or as Chris Rock once said,
"Man is basically as faithful as his option."
And plain and simple, Makoto had several options. He was a teenager, he was young, he was lustful, and he was in the moment. Of course, you always reap what you sow, and Makoto definitely delves down a path of more and more abominable decisions, each one seemingly worse than the last. But within the context of his character, which is intended to be authentic, it all seems relatively par for the course. People, in general, are not the benevolent creatures that they think they are. Biology has designed us in a way to be opportunistic, take what is given, procreate via sexual intercourse, with as many partners as possible, and seek preservation. All of Makoto's actions originate from this philosophy. He acts on these instincts in a realistic fashion, and he's not very likable. Nor should he be. Not everyone in life is likable, and that's just the harsh truth of the matter. I will say this, it's not pleasant to look at, and you may feel that Makoto's actions are ugly, but understand that the truth is rarely pretty, and it's often very hard to swallow. Life, oftentimes, is a disconsolate, oppressive journey with enough melancholic moments to make you want to kill your wife or a creepy cat who torments you ad nauseum. The King of Pigs is a gripping allegorical tale about class/wealth inequality and the dehumanizing aspect of school-age bullying, not only for those who are bullied, but for the instigators themselves, because of their internal hierarchical structure. Chan Young, a bright new student, exemplifies this dehumanization when his enthusiasm for school-related excellence wanes, due to the callous nature of the imperious quote-unquote dogs. The obedience of the other quote-unquote pigs is quite evident, as their resolve to combat their oppressors is noticeably absent. Except for one rebellious soul, Chul, the king of the pigs, Kim, who aims to alter the contemporary paradigm through a series of aggressive assaults against the tyrannical rulers of the classroom. Yan Sang-ho, director of the work in question, drowns his characters in unremitting gloom, never giving the viewer a chance to catch their breath, as he yanks you deeper and deeper into his ocean of despair. It is a welcomed experience nonetheless, that far too few directors are willing to accommodate. There are nightmarish illusions, harsh moments, and bone-chilling scenes. Coming out of this film, you're gonna think that life is just hopelessness and despair. But The King of Pigs is an impressive film, with a plethora of useful insights on the dynamics of societal hierarchies, and the ruthlessness of life from beginning to end. No one in this tale is good, but there are a lot of bad people in this tale. The King of Pigs is not your prototypical tale that features winners and losers. There's just losers. There's no redemption, there's no comeback story, there's no happy ending. It's just misery and death. Armitage III is a 1995 cyberpunk OVA that features an age-old human dilemma. What is the purpose of consciousness? Faced with the prospect of a diminishing, stagnant population, the Mars colony deems it necessary to hasten their biological development by means of using advanced robots, otherwise known as thirds. The ethical/sociological dilemma comes to the fore when job displacement becomes an issue, and feminists begin to protest as their womanhood is supplanted by the female thirds, who give birth via artificial insemination. The absence of purpose is evident from the outset, as numerous people define themselves and take great pride through their job. or their capacity to start a family. Think about it. How many times does a person ask you what you do for a living, and you respond promptly with, I work at fill in the blank? We tend to believe we have a life outside of our job, but the fact remains, without a job, we cannot live as we please. As of writing this review, our very own society will be facing the same predicament as automated cars replace truckers, robotic arms replace surgeons, and artificial wombs, potentially, replace human conception. A fascinating anime relic from the past, Armitage III resembles the highly popularized Ghost in the Shell, but, interestingly enough, its first episode predates the latter's release. Coming from the mind of Chiaki Konaka, who would later write Serial Experiments Lane, several episodes of Texhnolyze, and Digimon Tamers, it's no surprise the series deviated from the high-paced action sequences to a philosophical view on the human condition. In addition, the opening theme song is so 90s, and that's a good thing. Well, for me at least. Being a kid of the 90s, I absolutely love it and have it in my personal playlist and have listened to it several times and will continue to do so in the future. The next and final piece is Feeling from Mountain and Water, also referred to as Love of Mountain and River and Feelings of Mountains and Waters. This film does not contain any dialogue and is very poetic in its presentation. Hence, I will use a poetic verse to describe it. The joyful tune traversed the serene, painted landscape via a vibration that propagated an audible wave of which cannot be seen but only heard. The wave of pressure pierced the old sage's eardrums, altering him to the presence of a young, vivacious heart, whose spiritual vase had yet to be filled with the wisdoms of the world. But the sage had neither the time nor the willingness to instruct the uncouth adolescent, as he remained steadfast in his cryptic journey. Nevertheless, fate, as one would conjecture, inhibited his forward progression, forcing him to recuperate and recognize his last objective before his demise. Knowledge, after all, is a precious gift, one which must be transferred to the next generation to carry the luminescent spirit of the past into the future, thus propelling mankind further into the enlightenment through the standing on the shoulder of giants. The Goo Queen juxtaposed the jaunty tune of the flute with its methodical, quiet sounds. It offered sophistication and clarity via its demand for meticulous precision, rather than violent strumming. A test of patience, if you will. A reward of delayed gratification, which cannot be realized until the process of learning has been fulfilled. Such is life. And just as life capitulates to the inexorable flow of time, humans too must purposefully accept the natural flow of the world around them. The flowing streams must be followed in their natural direction and not against it, to avoid unwanted struggle. The Goo Queen should be played in a scrupulous, unhurried fashion, to prevent undesirable tones which may hurt the ears. And the end of life must be seen as a fulfilled journey, with a passing of understanding to the next generation, instead of clinging to possessions which cannot be transported into death. If one wishes to live a simple life, they must live simply, listen to the music, respect and understand nature, and pass your teachings on to others. Simple, yet so beautiful.